In the aftermath of the First World War, Germany found itself humiliated, economically devastated, and socially fractured. The Treaty of Versailles had imposed burdens that many Germans considered unbearable. Within this atmosphere of resentment and instability, extremist movements flourished. Among them emerged Adolf Hitler and the National Socialist German Workers' Party. In 1925, to protect Hitler from political rivals and street violence, a small paramilitary guard was created. It would be known as the Schutzstaffel, or SS. At first, it remained only a minor security detail commanded by Julius Schreck and, later, Heinrich Himmler, a man who envisioned the SS not simply as a bodyguard unit, but as an elite racial order loyal only to Hitler. By the early 1930s, Himmler transformed the SS into a ruthless and ideologically driven organization. Its members underwent strict vetting based on political loyalty and racial criteria, informed by distorted, pseudoscientific theories. They pledged unconditional obedience to Hitler, labeling themselves the future ruling class of a racially purified Europe. When Hitler seized power in 1933, the SS quickly expanded its authority. It began controlling intelligence through the Sicherheitsdienst, policing through the Gestapo, and the growing network of concentration camps through the Death's Head units. The Night of the Long Knives in 1934 demonstrated the SS role as the primary instrument of political terror. With the elimination of Hitler's rivals, the SS became untouchable. As Germany prepared for war, the SS developed new branches. The Waffen-SS emerged as a combat force, operating beside the regular German army. SS units would become infamous for both battlefield effectiveness and systematic brutality. A culture of extreme ideological commitment defined their actions. They believed victory to be certain, and they believed their crimes would never face judgment. The rise of the SS was not accidental. It represented a calculated effort to fuse political power, state security, and racial ideology into a single weapon. This weapon would serve the Nazi vision of dominance, and it would leave behind some of the darkest chapters in human history. The story of how the SS tried to save themselves in 1945 cannot be understood without first recognizing the level of power and impunity they once enjoyed. Their downfall would come later, but in their rise, they believed the Third Reich destined to last 1,000 years. The Second World War began in September 1939, and the SS immediately expanded its reach across the territories conquered by Germany. Behind the advancing Wehrmacht, SS Einsatzgruppen followed with clear instructions. Their orders were to eliminate political enemies, racial outsiders, and anyone considered a threat to Nazi authority. This included Polish elites, Jewish communities, Roma families, disabled individuals, clergy, and members of the intelligentsia. These operations introduced the world to a policy of systematic extermination. The invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941 escalated the SS atrocities to industrial levels. Under Heinrich Himmler's guidance, ideological warfare replaced any notion of military restraint. The SS declared entire populations racially inferior. Genocide transformed into a bureaucratic task. The Einsatzgruppen submitted reports that recorded thousands of executions in a single day, as though they were routine administrative duties. Their efficiency impressed the Nazi leadership and reinforced their belief that nothing could challenge their power. Parallel to these mass shootings, the SS also designed and implemented the concentration and extermination camp system. Camps such as Auschwitz, Treblinka, Sobibor, and Majdanek became central to the final solution, the planned annihilation of European Jewry. Inside these facilities, millions suffered in forced labor, starvation, medical experimentation, and gas chambers. The SS guards and administrators presided over these crimes with calculated indifference. The Waffen-SS, though a military branch, embraced the same ideological brutality. On the Eastern Front, they gained a reputation for both fierce combat and war crimes. Entire villages were destroyed beneath the claim of anti-partisan operations. Prisoners of war from the Soviet Union were executed under racial policies that denied them human status. Loyalty to Hitler rather than law or military ethics guided every action. The SS extended control far beyond killing. It seized industries, exploited forced labor, and even managed agricultural settlements in occupied regions. Wealth was extracted from populations slated for removal, creating a direct financial benefit from genocidal policy. The organization represented a combination of terror and profit. Rooted in racism and protected by impunity, by late 1942 the SS stood at the pinnacle of its power. Its leaders believed victory was inevitable. They imagined a future Europe reshaped in accordance with Nazi ideology, governed by the SS elite. At that moment, few within their ranks considered the possibility of accountability, yet war is unpredictable. A shift in momentum emerged on the battlefields. Defeat began to shadow the Third Reich. With it came the realization that the crimes committed could not be hidden forever. The SS did not change its actions as the war turned against Germany. Instead, its priorities evolved. Self-preservation became an emerging concern. In 1943, Germany suffered a catastrophic defeat at Stalingrad. The collapse of the Sixth Army signaled a dramatic turning point in the war. The myth of unstoppable German victory dissolved, and for the first time, senior SS leaders recognized the possibility that the Allied powers could reach German soil. With this realization emerged a more personal fear. The crimes of the SS were no longer hidden behind the shield of military success. Across Europe, resistance movements grew stronger. Intelligence reports reached Berlin describing the anger, determination, and desire for justice among occupied populations. The SS understood that reprisals for their brutal governance would be severe if Germany lost the war. Their ideology had left no room for moderation or mercy that could protect them now. Within Himmler's inner circle, discussions began focusing on potential outcomes after a defeat. Although loyalty to Hitler remained mandatory, private concerns increased. Some SS officials started questioning whether the Reich was truly destined to endure. The organization that once acted with complete certainty entered a phase of internal anxiety. The Allied powers contributed further to this fear. In December 1942, the United States, Britain, and the Soviet Union issued a joint declaration condemning the mass murder of the Jewish population. They vowed that those responsible would face punishment. This announcement directly targeted the SS. For the first time, the international community named their crimes and promised accountability through future legal action. In early 1944, Allied bombing intensified. SS headquarters, industrial facilities, and communication centers came under repeated attack. Concentration camps located near combat zones became increasingly difficult to operate. Prisoners were evacuated under brutal conditions. The SS attempted to maintain control, but every evacuation, every document transfer, and every forced relocation represented not confidence but panic. Inside Germany's borders, common citizens also sensed that victory was slipping away. Rumors spread regarding mass atrocities committed by the SS, although the Nazi propaganda machine denied such reports. Fear of a reckoning circulated among SS personnel themselves. Many began to realize that their entire identity was built upon actions impossible to defend before any court. The psychological shift was undeniable. The SS remained committed to carrying out orders, yet simultaneously started acting to conceal evidence, secure bribes, and plan escapes. The fear of accountability did not change their behavior toward victims. It intensified desperation. The approaching collapse of the Third Reich forced the SS to confront a future in which justice would pursue them relentlessly. The next steps they would take were not motivated by loyalty, but by survival. Allied forces advanced in 1944 and 1945. The SS initiated systematic efforts to erase the physical and administrative traces of their crimes. The organization that once proudly documented its genocidal policies now understood that those same records threatened their future survival. Orders were issued to burn files, destroy photographs, and eliminate transportation logs, execution reports, and camp registries. Paper archives containing the names of millions of victims were targeted for destruction. At Auschwitz, vast collections of documents were set on fire or shredded. In camps across Poland and Germany, crematoriums increased activity not only for killing, but for concealing the bodies of those already murdered. The SS demonstrated exceptional bureaucratic precision in genocide, and they applied the same precision to its concealment. They dismantled gas chambers, destroyed mass grave sites, and forced prisoners to exhume and burn corpses that had been buried earlier in the war. These operations were codenamed Action 1005, and they continued even as German defeat became certain. Witnesses became a direct threat. Prisoners who had seen the inner workings of the killing machine were often executed before liberating forces could arrive. Death marches were ordered, sending exhausted prisoners on long, forced evacuations toward the German interior. Thousands died along these routes from starvation, exposure, and summary execution. The objective was simple. No one who could testify against the SS should remain alive. Inside Germany, SS officers used their positions to secure personal safety. They transferred stolen property, gold, and valuables into private hiding places or foreign accounts. Some attempted to assume false identities, destroying their own records or altering military files to suggest service in less criminal branches of the armed forces. The destruction of evidence did not extend only to camp operations. The SS also tried to erase proof of political repression, medical experiments, and massacres committed during anti-partisan campaigns. Senior officials ordered subordinates to remove incriminating details from reports or to destroy the documents entirely. Despite these efforts, the speed of the Allied advance prevented full concealment. Many documents survived. Many prisoners lived long enough to be liberated. The scale of the SS crimes was too vast to fully hide. The rush to destroy evidence revealed a profound transformation. The SS had shifted from the role of confident enforcers to that of fugitives, attempting to escape their own history. Their desperation would soon escalate further, as some leaders sought direct negotiation with their enemies to avoid Soviet capture. As military collapse accelerated in early 1945, senior SS officials concluded that their survival depended on reaching the Western Allies before Soviet forces occupied Germany. They believed that American and British authorities would treat them more leniently due to ideological opposition to the Soviet Union. Heinrich Himmler, Reichsführer SS, pursued this strategy with urgency. Through secret channels in neutral countries such as Sweden and Switzerland, Himmler attempted to establish contact with Western diplomats. His proposals included partial surrender, release of prisoners, and assistance against the Soviet advance. In exchange, he expected political recognition or immunity for himself and the SS leadership. These efforts demonstrated his belief that the Western Allies might overlook genocide to maintain influence in post-war Europe. The Allies rejected Himmler's overtures. They viewed him as one of the principal architects of mass murder. Any negotiation that recognized his authority was considered morally unacceptable and politically dangerous. Despite this refusal, Himmler continued his attempts, convinced that the West feared the Soviet Union more than the crimes of the SS. Other SS figures engaged in similar operations. SS General Karl Wolff negotiated with American representatives in northern Italy, offering surrender in the region. Although these talks contributed to ending combat in Italy, Wolff's involvement did not erase his responsibility in deportations and atrocities. Within the SS leadership, internal conflict emerged. Loyalty to Hitler, once unquestioned, began to fracture. Hitler viewed Himmler's secret diplomacy as betrayal. As the situation worsened, Hitler stripped Himmler of his remaining authority. The Reich was disintegrating from within, and the SS no longer functioned as a unified organization. Despite the humiliating failure of high-level negotiations, the SS continued to act individually to protect their personal interests. Officers attempted to approach American lines with fabricated stories of resistance against Bolshevism or even claimed participation in rescue operations for prisoners. They hoped to present themselves as military professionals, separate from the ideological crimes that defined their roles. The Western Allies, fully aware of these tactics, instructed units to detain all SS personnel immediately. Identification. Marks such as tattoos were checked to prevent escape through disguise or false uniforms. The feel of panic spread through the ranks of an organization that once inspired fear across a continent. The attempts to negotiate did not produce the salvation the SS leadership imagined. Instead, they highlighted the collapse of their authority and the exposure of their true character. Desperation increased further as Soviet troops advanced. The SS knew that capture by the Red Army would likely result in immediate and violent retribution. In the final weeks of the war, Heinrich Himmler's authority disintegrated rapidly. He had spent years constructing the SS as the most powerful entity in Nazi Germany. Yet by April 1945, he stood isolated, distrusted, and increasingly irrelevant. His failed secret contacts with the Western Allies caused Adolf Hitler to sever all ties with him. The man once regarded as the second most powerful figure in the Reich became a symbol of betrayal. Himmler attempted to reinvent himself as a potential leader of a post-Hitler Germany. He believed that if he could present himself as a moderate negotiator, while concealing his central role in genocide, he might survive politically. This belief demonstrated both arrogance and a profound miscalculation of Allied intentions. Western leaders knew of his involvement in mass murder, and they had already declared that no pardon would be granted. Hitler's final orders removed Himmler from all command positions. The SS, built upon loyalty to the Führer, now witnessed its own chief condemned as a traitor. Communication lines collapsed, units scattered, and discipline eroded. Some SS officers continued fighting to the last moment. Others deserted immediately, discarding uniforms to avoid identification. Himmler continued to move through Germany using false identity papers. He traveled with a small entourage, still attempting to reach Allied lines. He imagined he could surrender on his own terms, emphasizing anti-communism as his defense. The Allies were prepared for such attempts. Their policy remained clear. Any SS member, regardless of rank, must be detained and investigated. During these final days, Himmler remained blind to the full consequences of his actions. He believed he could negotiate forgiveness through political value. He underestimated the moral weight of genocide and the determination of the Allies to prosecute those responsible. On May 21, 1945, his attempted escape ended when British forces detained him near Bremervörde. He carried falsified documents under the name Heinrich Hitzinger, though his identity was quickly discovered. A medical examination revealed the SS blood type tattoo on his arm, confirming who he was. Facing imminent interrogation and trial, Himmler ingested a concealed cyanide capsule. He died within minutes. His final act was consistent with the organization he led: deception, denial, and refusal to face accountability. Himmler's death did not protect the SS. It removed any remaining leadership and symbolized the total collapse of their ideological project. Those who had served under him could no longer imagine survival. Through hierarchy or loyalty, each member now faced the consequences as an individual, with justice closing in from every direction. The SS remained dangerous and violent until the end. Yet its leader's final hours revealed a stark truth. The organization had no honor, no future, and no escape from responsibility. As the Third Reich collapsed, the SS intensified violence against its prisoners. In early 1945, with the Eastern Front advancing rapidly, concentration camps in Poland and the Baltic region were ordered to evacuate. The SS sought to prevent prisoners from falling into Allied hands where they could bear witness to atrocities. These evacuations became known as death marches. Thousands of prisoners, already weakened by starvation and disease, were forced to march long distances through freezing weather. Anyone who collapsed or slowed down was shot. Entire columns of prisoners vanished along rural roads, leaving behind bodies buried in snow or abandoned in fields. The objective was to maintain secrecy, not survival. Within Germany, the SS continued to operate camps even when defeat was inevitable. In some locations, massacres were carried out shortly before liberation. The guards demonstrated the same ideological cruelty that had defined their actions throughout the war. Their behavior revealed that the organization had not lost its will to kill. It had only shifted its purpose from conquest to concealment. Communication breakdowns contributed to chaos. Some units acted on outdated orders, while others made independent decisions based on fear or spite. In Dachau, Buchenwald, and Ravensbrück, prisoners endured some of the harshest treatment in the final weeks. The Allied discovery of these camps exposed the full scale of SS brutality. Photographs and film footage taken during liberation later became crucial evidence in criminal trials. In cities like Berlin, the SS continued fighting until the Soviet army reached the heart of the capital. Fanatical units composed of young recruits and foreign volunteers were deployed with instructions to resist at any cost. The protection of ideology had transformed into a refusal to acknowledge reality. Even as the government collapsed, these units committed executions and suppressed dissent within German ranks. The death marches, uncontrolled killings, and chaotic decisions demonstrated that the SS had no unified plan for surrender. Their actions prioritized evading justice rather than preserving life. The atrocities committed in the final days were not accidents. They represented a continuation of the same policies that had defined the organization since its creation. When liberation arrived, survivors spoke of unimaginable suffering. Their testimonies contradicted any attempt by SS personnel to deny responsibility. Evidence of organized genocide became impossible to erase. The efforts to destroy records and silence witnesses failed. Every step the SS took to hide its crimes only created more evidence of guilt. The death marches stand as some of the most tragic chapters in the history of the Holocaust. They reveal that even in total collapse, the SS remained fully committed to its ideology of extermination. The organization tried to save itself by eliminating those who could speak the truth. The front lines collapsing and no central leadership remaining, individual SS members turned to desperate survival strategies. The loyalty they once proclaimed as absolute dissolved quickly. Ideology became a liability rather than a source of protection. To avoid identification, many discarded their uniforms, removed rank insignia, and attempted to blend in with regular Wehrmacht soldiers or fleeing civilians. One of the most distinctive identifiers of SS personnel was the blood type, tattoo on the inner arm. It served as proof of membership in the SS. As panic spread, some men attempted crude medical procedures to remove the tattoo, burning or cutting the skin in an attempt to erase their past. The process often caused infections and scarring, which later functioned as evidence of their attempts at deception. False identification documents became common. SS officers used forged papers claiming that they belonged to non-political, military branches or administrative roles. Some adopted civilian clothing and formed stories about fleeing air raids or losing family members. They believed that anonymity could protect them from investigation. Foreign volunteers in the Waffen-SS faced particular difficulty. These individuals came from occupied Europe, motivated by anti-communism, coercion, or propaganda. As surrender approached, many understood that local populations viewed them as traitors. Their attempts to disappear often failed, and some faced immediate reprisals from resistance fighters. The Waffen-SS sought to maintain a narrative that separated them from concentration camp guards. They claimed to be purely soldiers and denied knowledge of genocide. Historical evidence and post-war trials later demonstrated the falsehood of such claims. The ideological training and actions of the Waffen-SS consistently connected them to atrocities. Some SS commanders abandoned their units entirely. They issued no final orders and left subordinates to navigate their own fate. This breakdown in structure revealed how quickly a system built on obedience collapsed when fear replaced confidence. There were also individuals who attempted cooperation with the Allies. They provided limited information, hoping it would secure leniency. Their contributions rarely outweighed their crimes, and prosecutors remained aware of the manipulation behind these offers. The rapid transformation of SS members from ideological enforcers to fugitives illustrated the absence of conviction behind their claims of loyalty and superiority. When forced to choose between belief and survival, they chose survival. The collapse exposed the SS as an institution not of moral purpose, but of cruelty supported only by power. Despite all attempts at disguise or escape, the reach of Allied forces and the anger of liberated populations left little room for evasion. The era of SS dominance was ending. The era of justice was beginning. Allied armies occupied German territory in the spring of 1945. Systematic efforts were launched to identify and detain members of the SS. American, British, Soviet, and French forces all understood the significance of apprehending those responsible for the crimes committed under Nazi authority. SS personnel were treated differently from soldiers of the regular German army. Their affiliation alone placed them under immediate suspicion. Military police inspected prisoners carefully, searching clothing and bodies for the blood-type tattoo that marked SS membership. Those who attempted to remove or conceal the tattoo were identified through medical examination. Lists of known SS officers circulated among Allied units, supported by intelligence gathered from survivors of camps and resistance networks. The capture of an SS member often led to further information and additional arrests. Interrogations began immediately. Allied investigators focused on command structures, locations of destroyed evidence, and names of those directly involved in mass murder. Many SS officers attempted to deny involvement, insisting that they were ordinary soldiers or administrators. These claims often collapsed when confronted with documentation or eyewitness testimony. The Soviet Union pursued SS officers with particular determination, driven by the scale of atrocities committed on the Eastern Front. In many instances, Soviet troops executed captured SS personnel summarily. Although the Western Allies generally followed legal procedures, they shared the same commitment to preventing escape from justice. The collapse of the SS revealed the absence of solidarity among its members. Officers blamed subordinates. Subordinates blamed officers. Those who once demanded absolute obedience now argued they had no choice but to follow orders. The shifting of responsibility became a widespread strategy of self-preservation. Survivors of concentration camps played a critical role in identification. Their testimonies described specific guards, commandants, and physicians. Liberation forces conducted on-site investigations at camp locations, collecting evidence and securing archives that the SS had failed to destroy. Photographs, uniforms, and corpses found in hastily abandoned facilities provided visual proof of genocide. The more the Allies uncovered, the clearer it became that the crimes of the SS were not limited to a few extremist leaders. They were the result of organized policies executed by thousands of perpetrators. Each arrest represented the beginning of accountability for a system of violence that had spanned an entire continent. The capture of SS personnel marked a major turning point. The organization that once acted with impunity no longer controlled its fate. Justice would now proceed through formal legal processes designed to reveal the truth, expose the ideology behind their actions, and provide recognition to millions of victims. Following the unconditional surrender of Germany in May 1945, international focus turned toward the prosecution of those responsible for the atrocities committed under Nazi rule. The SS stood at the center of this process. The organization's reputation for brutality, its role in genocide, and its ideological foundation in racial supremacy left no doubt about its criminal nature. The most prominent judicial proceedings took place in Nuremberg, where leading figures of the Nazi regime faced trial before the International Military Tribunal. The evidence against the SS included witness testimonies, written orders, camp records, and film documentation captured during liberation. The prosecution established that the SS functioned as an instrument of terror and mass murder, not as a legitimate military body. At the conclusion of the trials, the SS as an organization was declared criminal. This ruling held every member accountable for participating in a system built on persecution and violence. Individual sentences ranged from execution to long-term imprisonment. The process of justice extended far beyond Nuremberg. In occupied Germany, Poland, the Soviet Union, France, and other liberated countries, thousands of SS members were tried for specific crimes committed in their regions. Camp commandants, guards, doctors, and administrators were confronted with survivors who recounted the truth of their actions. These testimonies ensured that the victims' experiences became part of the historical record. Despite the scale of prosecution, not every perpetrator faced appropriate punishment. Some escaped through forged documents and foreign networks, including clandestine routes known as rat lines. Number fled to South America or the Middle East, attempting to recreate identities free from the stain of the. So over the following decades, dedicated investigators continued pursuing these fugitives, determined to ensure that time did not erase responsibility. The post-war legal proceedings accomplished more than punishment. They created a framework for defining genocide and crimes against humanity under international law. The trials demonstrated that individuals cannot hide behind government authority when committing atrocities. Accountability is essential for the protection of human dignity. Historical judgment has remained clear. The SS embodied the most violent aspects of Nazi ideology. It demanded absolute obedience, enforced racial policies, and implemented a system designed to eliminate entire populations. The attempt by SS members to save themselves in the final days of the war could not erase the truth, visible in surviving documents, liberated camps, and the memories of those who endured their cruelty. The world continues to remember the victims and study the SS as a warning to future generations about the consequences of dehumanization, authoritarian fanaticism, and unchecked violence.